Hello everyone, this is Teresa's Crafty Cabana. I am working on some grungy prints today, but before I get into my grungy prints, I do have this kind of a trial print that I'm making. I was kind of curious about adding paint splatters on a gel plate, seeing if it would work. I wanted a texture to kind of put on my gel plate as well, so I had these die cuts that were from some hot air balloons. It was a project I had worked on in the past, and I thought I would use these to create a little bit of a design element. And then I have a toothbrush, just an old toothbrush, and a silicone brush, and I'm using my golden fluid acrylics. I've got a teal color. I'm trying to get some of the paint to splatter onto the gel plate, and then I'm also using my silicone brush to just kind of shake some spots on the gel plate. I did water down my paint, even though these are fluid paints. I added just a few, I think it was one spray of my mini mister, just to make it a little bit more fluid. And then I had quite a bit of leftover paint in my paint well, so I thought I would use my silicone brush to kind of paint in some of the areas on the hot air balloon images. Not that I'm using these as hot air balloons. I think I just really like the design of these, and you wouldn't really know that they were hot air balloons anyway by themselves like this. So this is just kind of like an abstract piece that I'm experimenting with and just kind of having fun with my paint and the gel plate. My exploring is to see if I can create different layers on my gel plate that have some texture in them. And as I'm going along, I am adding some designs outside of where those little 3 circles are. And I let it dry, but because it was so thick with those drops, I just put a piece of paper down just to see if it was actually dry. And on this side, everything seems to be dry and adhered to the gel plate. And there's only one little spot that pulled up at the bottom of the gel plate, so I think it's ready for my next color. I did the same thing. I watered it down with one spray of the mini mister, and I'm just using a different shaped silicone brush and this kind of like a dauber brush. It's got the stiffer bristles, so I'm going to try just doing some dabbing down on these 3 balloon pieces, and then also on the gel plate in between those teal areas. I'm just having fun with this, just seeing what kind of marks I can make with different tools that I have, especially different types of brushes. I've been kind of wondering how these could work together, different ways that I could add paint to my gel plate. So this is just helping me see how I can add some texture. Now I let that layer dry, and I have a layer that I'm going to add with some yellow. I added 2 sprays of the water to this one, so this one's really watered down. And this is a blending brush from Dollar Tree. It was a set of 3 little mini blending brushes for makeup, and I thought I would try the circle side to see if I can get some interesting circles. And to dry all of those layers, I used my blow dryer. And I kind of forgot about this, but when you use your die cuts and you're putting paint around it and you let it dry, the whole paint, everything is going to pull up if you try to pull up that die cut. So I do have to let that die cut stay on as part of my print. And all I'm going to do is add some paint to the back of it. This is just a warm gray color. I did add quite a bit of the gray paint because it has to cover all of those dimensional paint pieces and the die cuts. And it acts like a glue, and that glue or paint is going to adhere to the paper. And so essentially you're gluing these die pieces down to your paper that you're transferring to, in addition to all of the texture from the paint. I do like to put a lot of good pressure down because there's so many different layers to this that I could actually feel through the gel plate through the paper, and you can kind of see as it dried, you can see those die cuts through. I let this dry for probably about 10 minutes, and I'm pulling up really slow. Some of the little areas inside the circles, they didn't pull up all the way, but they were pulling up. So all I had to do was press them down with my finger, and they were still tacky, so they stuck right down to the page. Now this print has a lot of dimension to it. When you look at it and you tilt it, you can see obviously the hot air balloons because they're the die cuts, but the paint pieces that I splattered on and painted on, there's so much texture in this, and I think that just gives me some ideas if I wanted to use this on purpose for another gel print or any other purpose. Now I'm going to make grungy prints that I think I've been just wanting to restock in my supply. I like having some grungy options, and to get started on this first print, I just have some of my teal, and this is my Azo Gold. Again, these are the golden fluid paints. The Azo Gold is similar to the transparent red iron oxide, and it has kind of like a burnt sienna color, but also an orangey kind of color. It's really pretty, especially I like to mix it with the teal colors. Getting creative with my brayer here. And then I come back in and just use the brayer to remove just a little bit of that paint. I am wanting some of the gel plate to show so I can keep layering on top of this. Now removing this first layer, I just get a little bit of paint on the page here, but I am going to keep layering on top. So I will keep adding paint in different layers. I'm not trying to cover the entire plate when I add my paint. I'm just wanting different areas, and then that way I can keep removing some and leaving some on the plate. Then I thought maybe I can use this little bristle brush to soften these edges where the brayer left a little bit of a harsh line, and it worked pretty well as long as the paint was still pretty wet. I am layering this on top of the one that I had pulled the previous time. I don't leave it on very long for this part, probably about 1 to 2 minutes, and then I have another layer. That's with the yellow. I bring in some more of my teal, and this is my manganese. I think it's pretty fun and challenging to remove the paint this way, and also try not to remove too much of the paint. On this next layer, I am adding in a gold layer. I think I added too much. I really just wanted a little bit of gold. And since it's covering the entire background right now and I don't want it to cover my entire print, I am using this scrap piece of paper just to see if I can kind of streamline it down to having just a little bit of gold in some areas. I just didn't want it to be overwhelming. And pulling up this gold layer, you can see the shine from the gold. I'm not done adding my layers just yet. I want to add this light red color. It almost looks like an orangey red, and it's a really bright, fun, happy color. And again, I think this one looks really good with my blues because it has what looks like contrast. And then I do use my little stippling brush here just to soften some of these edges. I'm going to layer this right on top of that print. Try to capture a little bit in that white area. And this color pops off over here on the bottom left where there's the turquoise and the red behind it. I love those two colors together. They look really nice. I am adding turquoise as my next layer. And this is just straight turquoise, no white mixed in. I really like how the red and the turquoise are kind of mixing together to create almost like a dark blue color. And it looks really nice because it has a lot of contrast. But I did want to pull up what was left on the gel plate, so I'm using my collage medium just to add a layer of a matte finish, and that will pull up all the rest of this paint that's left on the gel plate. Once that layer dries, I can see if all these layers stuck to my print. Everything except the little corner on the bottom pulled up with this, and I think it looks so nice. And because it was off just so slightly, you can see it looks almost like shadows in that center area where the white was. So you still see teeny tiny dots of the white, but the rest looks like it's all filled in, and it almost makes it look dimensional. I really like how that looks. For the next two prints that I'm doing, I'm kind of working them a little bit in tandem. I'm going to be working some layers on a print, and that's going to be removing the paint, and then the other layers I'm going to be working into the gel plate, and that I will remove all together at the end. I start with dark on this one, a black layer. So this is going to be my gel print page that I'm going to be pulling off on my layers onto, and I wanted just a little bit more black to start. So I am trying to just get the pattern kind of messy looking. I'm using my fingers just to pounce a little bit. After that dried, I added in my warm gray. There were parts of my black that were still a little bit wet when I mixed in the warm gray, so some of those mixed together and created a darker gray. But I like the texture and the variation that it was starting to build on my print. This is just the extra page. I'm not really using this one as a print, but sometimes I want to remove just a little bit more, so I'm using this little page here for that. I'm adding in some color now. I've got my olive green, and that one's I believe an Amsterdam or a Royal Langnickel paint, and then I've got my golden fluid. So now I'm mixing my brands. Some are fluid and some are heavy bodied. I'm just going to keep adding layers, and with the different colors that I add, some of them will create more like browns and darker colors, some will remain kind of vibrant. I'm adding in that azo gold for my next layer, which kind of looks like a rust color in this case. And I really liked how this bright red color worked in my last print, so I do want to put a little bit of this onto my layers here. I'm just using my spare paper that has some of the blue and the gold on it, just to remove some of these areas of the red paint. Since this red has kind of an orangey tone to it, I did want to try mixing the yellow over the top of this one, since I had done the turquoise in the last print. And those two colors look really nice together. And since they kind of created an orange color, I thought this would be a good time to add in my turquoise. I know it'll create some kind of brown areas, but I really like that. I think these colors look really interesting together. My next layer is going to be that gold again. The gold did already start drying on my gel plate, so I decided to just pull this whole print with my off-white color. This is my parchment. And there are a lot of layers on this print, so I let this one dry for about 20 minutes. And I think it looks really neat. The red at the top kind of looks like flames, and then the blue and the green kind of contrast with that. And you can see these little circle indentions where the die cuts were in the gel plate, and the black paint almost stuck in those indentions, and I have a little bit of this design showing through from these circles. So this was the print that had a lot of texture on it, and I was really kind of pleasantly surprised with how much texture I can get on my gel plate to transfer onto my page. And then on this one, I just love this one. I think this one is definitely my favorite. I love the colors on this one. I love the dimension of that dark area. Definitely looks kind of like rusty, and this will make a great background, or I could cut out some die cut words or images, anything like that. And then this one will also make a nice background for something. It's nice that I can layer on top of this one with maybe some stamping or something. And of course my last one here, again you can see the faint outline of those black circles from the first die cut that I had on the gel plate here, and the colors. This is definitely nice and grungy. I've got some variation in my colors. I got the black layers in this one, and I just think they look so fun. I like creating grungy jelly prints and playing with my paints, just my paints, to see how much texture and layers that I can create to make the background interesting when I'm not using textures or texture plates. So let me know in the comments, how do you like to create texture with just paint? For me, layering like this and kind of dabbing off with my paper in between the layers, I think that's my favorite way, but maybe there's a way that I don't know of. I do also like using like the side of a paper and creating lines like that. I didn't do that this time, but I think that's another fun way to add some interesting texture into these gel prints. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And which of these prints do you think turned out maybe the most interesting? I noticed there was crackle at the top of this one too, because there were so many layers on this gel print. So can't wait to put these to work and figure out what I'm going to make with them. I might put them in a little mini book and do some distressing to them. Well, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy crafting, y'all!